Alright, so this happened about 5 years ago when I was visiting my grandparents' farm in Nebraska. They live way out in the sticks, one of those places where your phone loses signal, and the nearest neighbor is like a mile down the road. It's quiet, peaceful even, but also kind of eerie if you're not used to being so far from civilization. Anyway, I'd been staying with them for a week, helping out around the farm, and by the sixth day, I needed some time to myself. My grandparents are great, don't get me wrong, but there's only so much small talk about the weather and crop rotation I can handle. So, after dinner, I decided to take a walk. They've got this dirt path that runs along the cornfield and goes all the way to this little creek about half a mile down. I'd walked it plenty of times during the day, but at night, yeah, it's a different vibe entirely. The moon was out, so it wasn't pitch black, but those cornfields, they cast these weird long shadows that make it hard to tell what's real and what's your imagination. I put on my headphones, figuring some music would help me relax, and started down the path. I must have been walking for maybe 10 minutes when I thought I heard something. It was faint, like a soft rustling in the corn. At first, I told myself it was probably just the wind or maybe a raccoon or something, but then I noticed it was keeping pace with me. Whenever I stopped, the sound would stop, and when I started walking again, it picked up too. That's when I got that sinking feeling in my stomach. You know the one, like your body knows something's wrong before your brain catches up. I pulled out my headphones and stood still, listening. For a few seconds there was nothing, just the chirping of crickets and the occasional croak of a frog. But then, from somewhere deep in the corn, I heard this low, guttural sound. It wasn't quite a growl, but it was close. My heart started pounding, and I told myself I was being ridiculous. I mean, what was I expecting? A monster? I laughed it off, shook my head, and turned to head back to the house. That's when I saw him. About 20 feet away, stepping out of the cornfield like he'd been waiting for me. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, and dressed in these old, ragged clothes that looked like they'd been left out in the sun for years. His arms hung unnaturally low, like his joints weren't working right. But the worst part? His face. Or, I guess I should say, his lack of one. There was no face. Just smooth, pale skin, where eyes, a nose, and a mouth should have been. I swear I could feel him staring at me even though he didn't have eyes. I couldn't move. I was frozen in place, my brain screaming at me to run, but my legs wouldn't listen. Then he started walking toward me. Not fast, not slow, just steady, like he knew I wasn't going anywhere. His steps were heavy, crunching the dirt beneath his boots, and with every step, my fear ratcheted up another level. Finally, something snapped inside me and I took off running. I sprinted back toward the house, not daring to look over my shoulder. I could hear his footsteps behind me, heavy and deliberate, like he wasn't in any hurry because he knew he'd catch me eventually. When I reached the house, I practically threw myself inside and slammed the door shut. I locked it, then bolted it for good measure. My grandparents, who'd been watching TV in the living room, jumped up, startled. "What on earth's the matter with you?" my grandpa asked. I tried to explain about the man, the face, or lack of one, but the words were tumbling out so fast I didn't make much sense. My grandma just patted my shoulder and told me I'd probably seen a deer or maybe even a stray dog. But my grandpa, he got quiet, really quiet. He went over to the window and pulled back the curtain just a crack. He didn't say anything for a long time, but I could see the tension in his jaw. Finally, he turned to me and said, "You stay inside. No matter what you hear, don't open that door." That's when I realized he believed me. I didn't sleep at all that night. I stayed on the couch, clutching a baseball bat my grandpa had given me. Around midnight, I thought I heard footsteps on the porch, slow, heavy steps like the ones I'd heard on the path. But when I peeked out the window, there was nothing there. The next morning, my grandpa walked me down the path to show me there was nothing to be afraid of. But when we got to the spot where I'd first seen him, there were footprints. Big, heavy ones leading out of the cornfield and stopping right in the middle of the path, exactly where I'd been standing. My grandpa didn't say a word. He just nodded like he'd seen it all before. That was the last time I visited the farm. And to this day, I can't see a cornfield without feeling like someone, or something, is watching me.